Hello everyone, today I'm going to take you through the mix and the recording of the ASGORE cover I released a few weeks ago and how I did it with really basic techniques and how you can get some great mixes out of those basic techniques. Let's have a look at the mix real quick. So we have our drum group here, we have the keyboards, we got the bass, and then finally the guitars. So let's work our way down the list. Starting with the drums, this is a drum pack I got from Ableton's website called Drum Drops. I'll have it linked in the description. Essentially, it came with a couple different kits, but the one I was most interested in was the heavy rock kit. It has 3 different snares, and it's fucking awesome. I'll let you listen real quick. Let's solo it. So, super punchy. So how I've mixed these is there's no processing on the individual drum tracks themselves. And that's because the way these drum tracks are, they're already pre-processed. They don't need any additional EQ or compression individually or anything like that. They sound pretty great. What I have instead is I've put them in a group, which in your DAW may be a bus. Essentially, it processes all of these tracks together as one. And we have, first of all, some compression. This is very subtle compression. It's got about 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction. It glues the drums together a bit more, makes them sound a bit more natural. Then we've got a saturation plugin here. This is a free saturator. I'll have it linked in the description. It's kind of a pain to install, though, so good luck with that. Gives it a bit more low end and high end. It helps fill out some of the gaps in the EQ. It sounds really great. And finally, we have this. This is called a clipper. This is a bit more advanced. However, what this does is it'll take the highest peaks of your drum, so when your snare hits or your kick or whatever's loud, and it brings those peaks down. However, it creates this weird illusion because it doesn't sound any quieter. So what ends up happening is the impacts sound much bigger without affecting the rest of your mix. And again, it just helps fill out the drums a bit more. It makes them more impactful, and it'll help you a lot when you're mastering. We're not going to talk about mastering today, though. That's a whole other ball game. Let's listen to what each plugin does individually. We'll go through each one. So you can hear the compressor's very subtle. You may not even be able to hear that. You can definitely tell when the saturator kicks in, it fills out so much of the EQ. And again, with the clipper, it just gives it a bit more compression. It sounds pretty cool. Moving on, we've got the keys. This is also very simple, but I'll take you through real quick. Here we have a synthesizer. Let's hear how it sounds. It's very 8-bit, really cool. I sort of created it to pay homage to the original song, you know. And I created it with this program here called Vital. This is a completely free synthesizer, and it is very beginner friendly. All this visual stuff, it's really great to use. I recommend you get this synthesizer. Get up a video on the basics of synthesizing. You'll have a good time. So these are the settings here. And in terms of EQ, rolling off a lot of the low end because it wasn't necessary. This is a lead synth. Doesn't really need any of that. Some very subtle compression. It didn't need much, just enough to sort of get it sitting better in the mix, tame some of the harsher peaks. Next, we have some strings. Let's give them a listen. And the strings come from this free plugin. It's called Labs. I'll have that in the description too. You can get loads of instruments through Labs. We're just using the strings here. We've got some compression. Very subtle, this compression. Doesn't need much. Finally, we have here this like piano synth hybrid. And this is how this sounds. So a couple of things going on here. This is a free grand piano. It's on Ableton's website. It's called, it's in like a grand piano pack. And it sounds really cool with like the octaves and the synthesizer that's part of it. In terms of EQ, we've rolled off some low end. And there's a scoop in the mids so that when the rest of the instruments are playing, this piano sort of fades to the back a bit. It's not so present in the mix. Those scoop mids don't matter so much when it's playing by itself because it's the only thing playing. You can hear it. And again, the compression's very subtle. It's not doing a whole lot. It's just taming the loudness. Now, when it comes to these MIDI tracks, they just don't need a lot of processing. A lot of good MIDI instruments just come pre-processed. You really don't need a lot when it comes to MIDI instruments, at least in most cases. Next, we have the bass. Let's listen to the bass. Pretty beefy bass. Now, I'm going to hammer this point in now, and it's really important. Don't overcomplicate your bass. So many of my older mixes are completely ruined because I tried to do some crazy shit with the bass that you shouldn't do. The bass is the foundation of your mix. It determines the energy, okay? It can be done right very simply and with completely free plugins in my case. So let's go through the two tracks. Both of these tracks have an identical audio source. I haven't recorded the same thing twice. It is the identical audio file. Let's listen to the top one. So that top track is just the bass directly into the audio interface with these plugins. And what we've got here, rolling off anything below 50 hertz, we don't need that. It's just going to make it dead muddy and weird. We're boosting with the shelf at 100, so just a little bit bass boost. You might not need that. I just have a really crap bass, to be honest. So I need that. You may not. Massive scoop to the mids, helps it fit better in the mix. The mids aren't necessary when you're mixing stuff like this. And then rolling off also most of the high end, because again, you don't need that. Now, this compressor is very aggressive. The attack and release are both at their minimum. Ratios at 10, and we're aiming for about 10 dB of gain reduction, but we can go from anywhere 5 to 15. It's got to hammer this bass. It's got to get it really consistent sounding, but without sucking the life out of it either, which is a really fine line to draw. If your compressor starts taking the low end out of your bass, you've gone too far. Roll it back a little bit. And finally, again, we just have this saturator. Very good for bass, makes it a lot beefier. And let's hear what those plugins do. I'll turn them all on individually. We can now elevate that and make it a bit more metal with this track here. What is that sounding like? Now, you're probably thinking, that's terrible. It's nasally. There's no bass to that. But you got to remember, we have this DI track. That's where the bass is coming from. What this track is doing here is, first of all, we've got this free amplifier on it. I'll leave a link in the description. It's not great for guitar, but it turns out for distorting bass, it's really, really good. It sounds awesome. We have that, and then we have this EQ, which is very, very aggressive. Basically, we only want the mid-range coming through here. Everything else would sound really terrible if we let it through. I'll show you real quick. Here is without the EQ. Then if I put it on, it's just a bit more focused. And then what you end up with is a really cool bass sound. Pretty cool. What I would recommend, though, is that during sections of your song, if there's not a lot of rhythm going on, like the rhythm guitars will stop, take out the distorted channel here, like I've done. Otherwise, it'll cut through a bit too much, and it just won't sound right. You can hear there's not a lot of rhythm going on there, so I've taken out the distorted track, and the bass doesn't jump through too much. Moving on, we finally have the guitars. Now, the guitars are also very, very simple. They were all recorded with a tube screamer going into the Boss IR2 on some of the metal channels. I think I showed that in the original video. The Boss IR2, I'm going to make a whole video about soon. It's amazing for people who are getting into guitar and are getting sick of their practice amp. I cannot recommend it enough. It fixes every problem I have with amp simulation for beginners. They were all recorded by the Boss IR2 directly into interface, with, of course, the tube screamer. Let's first hear the rhythm track. So what we've got here, we've double tracked. If you don't know what that is, essentially you record the same line 2 times over. In this case, I have the same amp settings. You can have different amp settings. However, if you're recording metal, I'd keep it to the same amp settings. And then what we've got, some EQ here, and what that's doing is this cut here, very narrow cut at 200, creates room for the snare. The guitars can bury the snare really fast, so you create some room here, your snare's going to punch through a lot better. And there's a little reduction here at 2.5 kilohertz you've really got to watch out for, because that's the frequency that will hurt your ears if there's too much. So if you're listening to your mix at high volumes or even normal volumes and it's hurting you, look for some tracks where 2.5 is building up, or alternatively go on your master. However, I'd recommend getting the tracks before you go for your master. Finally, this is a bit more of an advanced technique. When you do low-end palm mutes on your guitar, or chugs, you create a lot of low-end, which for your mix isn't great, because you want your bass to occupy that. It's just going to make things boomy and muddy and gross. So what I have here is something called a multi-band compressor. And what that'll do is compress a specific frequency, not the whole thing. Don't compress distorted guitars, because there's already so much compression going through them that you'll ruin them completely. They don't need any compression. This, however, is different because it only targets the low end when I hit palm mutes. And I'll show you that real quick. It'll activate whenever I hit a palm mute. In this next line, there's no palm mutes, and you'll see the compressor doesn't do anything. It'll help your mixes sound more professional. And then next, we have the lead track here. Let's have a little listen to the lead. So pretty interesting lead sound. Let's go through it. We've got 2 DS's here. Don't know why I used 2 here. I really don't know. You'd be fine with 1, but I have 2. And essentially, you'd usually use those on vocals to record like the harsh sibilants. Like if I go, tss, a DSer would target that. However, I found that it can work really well for guitar sounds that are maybe a bit shrill. And then next, we've got a couple send and return tracks that we're using. First of all, I'm sending the guitar to a delay track, which is making it sound really wide. It's awesome. Now, usually I'd say be very careful with the amount of delay you use. It can muddy your mix up quick. It just so happened that here it worked well to have a massive delay sound. So do what suits your song best. If you just need a subtle delay, go for it. It'll make a difference. Some EQ here at 2.5 because delay gets harsh very quick. You wanna make sure you get rid of that 2.5. And then finally, we have something really interesting. This is called a shifter. This plugin changes the pitch of stuff, but you can use it as like a weird chorus. This setting here, which is called fine, I put it to 7, and then I click the wide button. And again, I've taken out 2.5 because it was just this one gets really harsh. But what that does, I'll show you it without first, and then I'll turn on the shifter, and you'll see what that does to the sound. Shifter going on. And yeah, that's the lead guitar sound. For the most part, it's pretty basic. Just that shifter and delay take it to the next level. And you got to employ stuff like that to make your leads more interesting. You can employ very basic techniques and get some really cool sounds. Anyway, that'll about do it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed. If you haven't seen the ASGORE cover yet, go check it out. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.